Hello, my lovely anatomists and physiologists. Welcome back to our video on the parasympathetic nervous system. So let us take a little bit of time and go back to our table that we're filling in. Remember, as we investigate each division, we're paying attention to four things: function, organization, the neurotransmitters, and also the receptors. And of course, this table here is just our quick way of summarizing and comparing this information. So let's take a look first at functions. And when we think about the parasympathetic division, sometimes it is described as rest and digest. That's a nice rhyme. Help us remember. I've also read it described as feed and breed. Another nice rhyme. And that helps us to remember, not only is it kind of the calming division of the nervous system, not only is it coordinating the activity of the digestive system, but it's also involved in our sexual arousal and reproduction. Remember, when we think about these two divisions, we really should think about these as being opposites of each other. So everything that the sympathetic division does, the parasympathetic division is going to do the opposite. So we can start by thinking about how it's going to decrease all of these things that the sympathetic division increased. So it is going to decrease heart rate, decrease blood pressure, decrease respirations, decrease pupil diameter, it is going to constrict respiratory tract. So we can list that in here as well. Just constrict. And maybe let me get that away from the arrow so that you do the same thing in your notes. So not only are we slowing down our respirations, but also instead of dilating those airways, we're going to constrict those airways. And it's not that we're going to have trouble getting air into the lungs here. It's just we're kind of undoing the work of the sympathetic, right? Remember, these divisions are functionally working together to regulate homeostasis. So if you can turn something on, you need to be able to turn it off. If you can turn it up, you need to turn it down. So think in terms of that. A lot of times people will say parasympathetic division decreases metabolism. And so we kind of get this idea that all the arrows go down, everything is in the decrease, but that's not true. So we have several things that we're increasing. We're going to increase smooth muscle activity in the urinary tract and GI tract. Gastrointestinal tract is talking about esophagus, stomach, small and large intestine. We're increasing digestive gland activity and secretions. We are also increasing blood flow. And gland secretions. And it's associated with arousal. So I'm just going to write the word arousal here because I do feel like I'm running out of room. And the last little piece of information that I wanted to put in here is coordinates defecation. So I sort of ran out of room there as well. So defecation. And I'm squeezing in, you can't see it, but I've squeezed in an I-O-N into my word there. Okay, so let's go back to our sort of idea, our drawing of the parasympathetic nervous system. So we're looking at the organization. And I'd like to draw that same picture that we did in the sympathetic video. So it's going to look like maybe the ice cream, the scoop of ice cream on a cone, but we're drawing our scoop of ice cream so that that's representing our brainstem. So we're not going to fill it in at the top or at the bottom, and then make that calm down and form the cone. And let's go ahead and label that we're in the brainstem region here where that sort of ice cream scoop is. And then down here, this is our spinal cord. Okay, so when we talk about the parasympathetic division, it can be referred to as the craniosacral system. And that's because we're going to see cranial nerves, and then we're going to have pelvic nerves in the region S2 to S4. So we're going to see our parasympathetic preganglionic neurons S2 to S4, where the S is standing for sacral. So you want to write that in at the very base of your spinal cord. And then we're going to see cranial nerves. We're going to see the following cranial nerves. So we're going to get oh, I see what I did. Nerve 3, cranial nerve 3. So this is our oculomotor. And then we're going to get number 7, which is our facial. And we're going to get number 9, which is our glossopharyngeal. And we're going to get the vagus, which is number 10. We could go ahead and highlight the vagus because this is where the majority of the parasympathetic information will leave. We say like 75% of parasympathetic outflow is traveling on the vagus, which is cranial nerve number 10. Now this nerve is coming off the brainstem and it's extending all the way through the thoracic and abdominopelvic cavities. And then you have branches, of course, going to all of your different organs and so forth. As we are looking at the craniosacral region, what we're seeing here is, of course, our preganglionic neuron. So just like we had our motor neuron in the thoracolumbar region of the spinal cord for the sympathetic division, we have a multipolar neuron located in the brainstem or in the sacral regions, right? And this is going to be the neuron that's going to extend out and go to your ganglion. And notice that I went ahead and drew my multipolar motor neuron with the cell body there in the brainstem region. And I did a second one here coming out of the sacral region. And then I did a really long axon. So one of the things that we will see is that in the parasympathetic nervous system, those preganglionic neurons are super long. They're going all the way either really close to the effector or actually as part of the effector organ wall structure. So what I'm going to do next with my preganglionic neuron, I'm going to go ahead and show you my synaptic knobs here. And then I'm going to grab my black pen to show my ganglionic neuron. And my ganglionic neuron is going to be very short. And I'm going to represent this one down here. Grab an orange color. Let's see. I'm going to draw like my stomach. That's my stomach. That's my small intestine. Oh my goodness. And what I'm going to show you is that preganglionic neuron actually goes all the way into the stomach. modify my drawing. So my preganglionic neuron goes all the way into the stomach. And then I have a black ganglionic neuron actually inside the stomach, in the wall of the stomach. And so what we will see with the parasympathetic nervous system, we have either terminal ganglia, which means like it's super duper close. It's super duper close to the effector. So this is trying to show, oh, we're going as oculomotor and we're going to muscle the eyeball. So I drew like, it's really close to an eyeball. And then we have terminal ganglia then that are located very, very close to the effector tissue, or we have what are called intramural ganglia. And these are described as actually embedded into the organ wall. And that's primarily what we're going to see. That's primarily what we're going to see once we get into the thoracic and abdominopelvic cavity. You know, when we talked about, I'm going to grab my red marker. When we talked about that vagus nerve is going to extend all the way from the brainstem and go all the way into the thoracic abdominopelvic area. So it's going to have branches that are going to be synapsing onto intramural ganglia, I should say. And so, you know, here we see, let's fill in our detail to our chart. So we have a nice comparison when we talk about organization. So when we talk about organization, we're going to see again the long preganglionic neuron, and it's either going to be part of the I'm going to say brainstem, or S2 to S4 regions. And brainstem, remember, he's talking about cranial nerve. So I'm going to make a little notation here. We're talking about cranial nerve 3, oculomotor. We're talking about cranial nerve 7, which is the facial. We're talking about cranial nerve 9, which is the glossopharyngeal. And we're talking about cranial nerve 10, which is the vagus. And the vagus, remember, is where 75% of the outflow of the parasympathetic nervous system is traveling. So that's super, super major. And then we're going to have a short ganglionic neuron, and the cell body from this neuron will be described as either in the terminal ganglia, which means really, really close to the effector tissue, or we'll see it described as intramural ganglia, meaning actually embedded in the organ wall, Okay, I actually want to go back to my chart for just a minute and list my neurotransmitter, and this one y'all will love. It's our old friend. It's acetylcholine, which we can abbreviate big A, big C, little h. So what we will see is both the preganglionic neuron and the ganglionic neuron will be releasing acetylcholine. So acetylcholine will be the neurotransmitter of this division. And then when we talk about the effector cells, again, we're talking about the same effectors, right? We're talking about cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, adipose tissue, and glands. And what we'll see as part of the cell membranes of those effector tissues, we're going to have, again, receptors, and we're going to see these receptors are going to be referred to as the cholinergic system, as in acetylcholine. And again, we have two. We have a nicotinic receptor, and we have a muscarinic receptor. Nicotinic and muscarinic. Now, the nicotinic receptor is actually a very old friend. This is our ligand-gated cation channel. This is exactly the type of receptor we talked about when we did skeletal muscle. We said that acetylcholine paired to the receptor opened, the sodium flooded into the cell, and the cell was depolarized. That's a nicotinic receptor. I called it that at least once or twice. I didn't emphasize it real heavily, but it was mentioned in my courses. Now, when we said that the sympathetic division preganglionic neuron is releasing acetylcholine, that means we also have those nicotinic receptors there. So let's get back to this set of notes that we took here, and notice we said, oh, acetylcholine is being released by that preganglionic neuron. So what that means is the ganglionic neuron has nicotinic receptors. So the reason it's responding to acetylcholine is nicotinic receptor. When we look at our drawing that we did for the parasympathetic nervous system, and we said, okay, acetylcholine is being released right here, the synapse between the preganglionic neuron and the ganglionic neuron, then again, that means the ganglionic neuron has nicotinic receptors. So that's where we see those nicotinic receptors, in addition to, of course, skeletal muscle. When we're looking at the synapse here between the ganglionic neuron and then the cells that it's controlling, in that case, that's where we're going to see those muscarinic receptors. And so the muscarinic receptors are going to be G protein coupled receptors. And y'all, we talked about this. We've talked about this a few times, right? So this means in this case, acetylcholine binds. That's going to then activate the G protein, and then the G protein activates a second messenger. Second messenger can be a cyclic AMP, or it can be a calcium ion, right? Key thing, when you have a G protein coupled receptor, that neurotransmitter, acetylcholine, can either depolarize or it can hyperpolarize the cell. And who gets to determine what happens? Who decides? It's the cell. This is the beautiful part. The cell is making its receptors. The cell is making its G protein. The cell then is deciding how it wants to respond to acetylcholine. Is acetylcholine going to depolarize the cell or hyperpolarize the cell? It could go either way. We saw the same thing when we investigated the alpha and beta receptors in the sympathetic division last time. We saw, depending on what type of receptor it was, the cell could either stimulate or it could be inhibited. So we're seeing the same sort of thing here. Again, we're going to see this on the effectors. So the nicotinic, remember, is located on those ganglionic neurons, actually in both divisions, but the muscarinic receptor is located on the effectors. Effectors, remember, are your cardiac muscle, your smooth muscle, your adipose tissue, and your glands. All right, y'all, I'm double checking my notes. It's looking good. That went a little bit faster. Stay tuned for just a little tidbit on the enteric nervous system. And as always, take care of yourselves and each other.